If you had 20 seconds to save your life, would you recognize them when they arrived? Would you hear the warning disguised as a whisper? Feel the future trembling in a stranger's hands? On the day everything ended and began, my 20 seconds were trapped inside an elevator between the first floor and the fourth, between routine and ruin, between a quiet neighbor's breath and a folded square of paper that said, "Get out of here if you want to live." Cold open, archival feel, wide shot, a high-rise under clouded daylight. Sirens smear the air. Their reflections sweep across glass, cut into an empty elevator. A red stop button gleams like an unblinking pupil. Freeze frame. My name is Alara Eris Sterling. 30 years I lived in that building. I knew the rhythms. Sunday pot roasts, hallway gossip, the clatter of grocery carts, the small weather of neighbors' lives. I knew the elevator's sigh, the way it paused politely, almost human, before closing its doors. I thought I knew everything that could happen between floors. I didn't, not even close. The 20 seconds, the groceries were heavy bones for stock. Onions, the good carrots my granddaughter likes. I pressed 7, leaned against the mirrored wall, and planned dinner. The doors slid shut on a life I recognized. They reopened on one ID and single quotes T.4th floor. Lionel Evans stepped in. He was new, a quiet man in his 50s, polite, adequate smiles that didn't ask anything in return. But that afternoon, his eyes never found mine. His breathing sawed short, his hands, capable hands, I had always thought, shook as if they'd learned a terrible secret before the rest of him had. The doors began to close. He moved as if to scratch his wrist, then misdirected his own gesture, sliding something small, warm, folded 4 times into my palm. His fingers brushed mine, a human spark, panic, clean and electric. I looked up, questions already forming. He barely moved his lips. "Don't say anything." I opened the note with the reflex of an old habit mothers learn to read the world quickly. 4 words punched through the paper, each one louder than the last. Fake sick and get out. I didn't laugh. I wanted to, for one naive, defiant second. But the hallway light was a thin blade, and Lionel's face was cut on it, pale, bloodless, braced for impact. Behind his fear was something worse. Certainty. My heart went off like a dropped tray. I clutched my chest and let my knees fail a little. "Oh dear God," I said. "A prayer and a performance. I don't feel well." Lionel hit the emergency stop. The elevator sighed, then ceased, caught between floors, a throat clamped shut. With a grunt he wrenched the doors apart just enough. Metal complained. Air rushed in. "Get out, Miss Sterling," he whispered. Now I went. Groceries spilled, carrots rolling like bright witnesses. My palms burned against the hallway carpet as I scrambled through the narrow mouth he held open. I stood back to the wall. He kept the doors braced, and then only then his eyes met mine. What lived in them wasn't goodbye. It was warning, and a promise he didn't have time to keep. The doors clapped shut. The elevator swallowed him whole. ... Cut away. Witness tone. Cut to a security camera angle. An empty corridor. Low hum. A frame or 2 jitters. A timecode stutters, then runs. Some moments arrive so fast the mind can't find them until later. It files them where it stores dreams and sudden falls. It refuses to believe. I leaned there in the hallway, dizzy by design, and then genuinely dizzy until the building's silence broke open and the city screamed through. Sirens. They rose from the parking garage and climbed the brick the way ivy does in a vine. Doors opened. Faces emerged. Someone shouted the word blood, and my legs misheard it as run. But I didn't run. I waited ridiculously for the elevator to bring him back, as if it were a ferry between danger and ordinary life. It didn't. The knock on my door. 3 polite beats, dressed as authority. Officer, Ms. Alara Sterling. My name in an official mouth is a rearrangement of the self. Yes, I said. What's going on? They were upright men with exhausted eyes. I'd seen that look at hospitals. I braced. Officer, did you know the man who was in the elevator with you? There's a grief so quick it leaves no bruise. I felt it then, preemptive, premature. What happened to him? A glance, then the kind of sentence that turns a person into evidence. Officer, he was found deceased when paramedics arrived. It appears someone attacked him. Deceased, appears. Words with distance baked into them. Reality prefers shorter ones. Dead, beaten, gone. The room didn't tilt, but it forgot its corners. I nodded, because that's what Bafas do when the mind is elsewhere, racing the past for clues. Lionel, the note, that face, not a joke. not a misunderstanding, a man who knew where the danger waited and where I stood in relation to it. After the officers left, I sat alone. The elevator was out of order. The building's heart had skipped. I listened to the quiet, which is never truly quiet if you know what to hear. Pipes, elevators, breathing, the small business of a building that believes in tomorrow. I didn't, not that night. I unfolded the note again, hoping the ink had mercy. The paper sweated in my hand. When I turned it over, something faint bloomed under the lamp, a whisper of blue. The first side had hidden. Don't trust anyone in the building. I read it twice. Then I read it like a mother who has a son upstairs with a wife she doesn't entirely trust. Don't trust anyone. The words dissolved and reformed around the only people that mattered, Doris and Kendra, and then around all the others. Doris on 5. The Peterson twins who fought like it was their job, the delivery kid who knew my name, the superintendent who fixed our heat, with a hymn under his breath. Anyone is a big word in a small world. The detective morning sharpened the building into a grid of facts, crime scene tape, an elevator with its back to us, the sniff of bleach. The lead detective had a face that drooped at the day with him. He listened while I recounted everything, the note, the whisper, the way Lionel had stood between me and what? A threat shaped like a person, very likely inside these walls. Detective, you say you didn't know him. I didn't, I said, but I heard the cowardice in it. The lie was of omission. I knew him now. I knew him in the way you know someone who has told you the truth before anyone else would leave. Live. The detective flipped a page. Detective, interesting. We found your name written in his apartment, Era Sterling, 7th floor, next to 2 other names. Those were crossed out. The words landed like furniture pushed across a floor upstairs. Heavy, undeniable. Why? I asked. He closed his notebook. That's what we're going to find out. We didn't say the other part out loud. We don't have long. Whoever killed him believes they finished the job, but I'm still here. That makes a problem for somebody. Interlude, documentary chorus, cutaway interviews, blurred faces, voice modulation, neighbor number 1, audio only. He kept to himself, but not rude. He looked like a man who had done math on the world and didn't like the answer. Neighbor number 2. We heard the sirens and thought it was the garage against kids, a crash, not murder. Neighbor number 3, Doris, 5th floor. She's been here forever. Ara, she waters the geraniums when I forget. You're telling me someone wanted to hurt her here. The envelope night made a country of the hallway. Footsteps traveled like rumor. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his wide, urgent, almost apologizing for being right. Around 2 in the morning, the building exhaled. A shadow paused outside my door. I stood on the other side, breath small, hand hovering over the lock that suddenly felt fictional. Something slid under, a white envelope, anonymous, clean. I should have called someone. I didn't. Mothers of grown sons read their own mail. Inside, a newspaper clipping about a murdered businessman tangled in a financial scandal, and a note, hurried, slanted, written by someone whose hand feared the clock. It all started with your husband's inheritance. Don't trust anyone, Marcus. 6 years gone, and suddenly the past had a voice again. We had argued about the family land, whether to sell, to hold, to let it pass to the granddaughter like a story. He was stubborn. I was more so. Then the accident that wore its mask too perfectly. Wet road, bad angles, a car that didn't forgive. I had built a life around the official version. Now a stranger's pen told me the prologue was a lie. When grief returns, disguised as a clue. You don't get to choose how to feel. You follow it. 8 is enough. The lobby filled with neighbors orbiting gossip like planets, each keeping their respectable distance while inhaling every detail. Doris intercepted me with the confidence of a woman who believes even tragedy needs sugar for borrowing. Ara, did you hear? The man in the elevator, an accountant. They say he worked for a woman on the 8th floor. A number of floors is a distance measurable by breath. 8 is 2 above mine. I felt the building tilt. Kendra, I said, before I meant to. Doris's eyebrows asked the question for me. Your daughter-in-law, she confirmed unnecessarily. I climbed the stairs. Elevators were enemies now, and knocked on my son's door. Darius opened with a tired love I recognized even through worry. Behind him, Kendra appeared in a silk robe, the color of polished wine. She moved like a person who knew where every camera was. Mother-in-law, she said, bright as glass. To what do we owe the honor? I wanted to ask about the man, I said, careful, polite. A stranger at my own family's table. Terrible business. She replied, and poured the word terrible over the scene like perfume. He was my accountant. Minor matters, nothing important. Something hardened at the corners of her smile. Darius put a hand on my arm, gentle, pleading. Don't start. I didn't. Not there. Enemies, she added, almost cheerfully, in that world. Endless. I'm not surprised he ended up like that. The sentence carried an awful grammar. That world ended up like that. A predictive tense. A practiced tone. I left before the anger could name itself. In the hallway, I let the building hold me up. The fifth-floor light flickered. A child laughed 3 doors down. Ordinary sounds, recruited by dread. The study grief leaves rooms sealed with invisible tape. I cut through mine. Marcus's study smelled of paper and cedar. Dust made a skin over his desk. In the bottom drawer, under tax returns and stubborn paper clips, a folder carried my name in his careful hand. Or if something happens to me, find Lionel Evans. He's the only one I trust. The name hit the air like a dropped plate. Lionel, not a stranger then, a ghost in our files turned neighbor in our elevator. I flipped through more papers. Contracts, transfers, the kind of clean crimes that require accountants brave enough to do poor men's math on rich men's lies. One name surfaced again and again in the margins, underlined, circled, a hairline crack through a polished life. Kendra Reed. Marcus had been following money the way other men follow weather. He had written the truth where only his widow might find it. Too late to save himself. I pressed my palm to the desk and begged the past to be kinder than the present. Security, or the illusion of it. The maintenance room was a cave of cables, screens like aquarium windows. Ethan, the superintendent's wheat boy in his 20s who fixed things with care, hesitated at my request. He didn't want to betray the building's protocols. I didn't want to betray a man who had saved my life. Please, I said. He told me to live. I need to know why. He closed the door. We scrolled through time. 4th floor, to 18 p.m. The camera watched a hallway without blinking. Lionel entered the frame, shoulders square. I joined him. We disappeared into the elevator. The image hit. 5 minutes vanished like a magician's scarf. Cut, Ethan murmured. Only the manager can access these. Or an owner with permission. An owner like my daughter. He swallowed. She requested access 2 weeks ago. Theft complaint. I didn't think we searched more. On the 8th floor, an hour before the murder, a camera caught a woman entering with a large black tote, sunglasses indoors, a face tight with decision. Kendra looked up once toward the lens, toward my floor, toward fate. Hard to say. Can you copy this? I asked. He nodded. Please be careful, he said softly. Not everyone in this building is who they seem. The recording went into my pocket, a small hard rectangle with the weight of a confession. The perfume. I hid the note and the USB in a plain envelope in a plain drawer. Then put a false bottom in to feel clever. Fear makes you theatrical. It also makes you right. At 2 a.m., the apartment reshaped itself around a new sound. The floorboard that only sings when the weight on it is lying. I rose without switching on the light. The living room wore my furniture as shadows. A silhouette moved by the desk, slender, assured. A key glinted in her hand. I stood behind the door and learned patience. The drawer opened. The false bottom surrendered. Paper whispered against paper. The shadow left with my envelope and a ribbon of perfume braided into the air. The expensive Floralamba Kendra had worn since her wedding day. The scent I used to compliment at holidays because women are kind to one another even when we don't fully approve. I called her in the morning. Kendra, I said, voice steady enough. We need to talk. I'm busy, she replied, voice as smooth as her robe. It's about Lionel. A pause, a seam unraveling. What does he have to do with me? You tell me. She hung up. Threats arrive in costumes, kindness, concern, silence. This one dressed in absence. Fear changes owners. The text came an hour later. From a number that didn't exist yesterday. Stop digging. Curiosity killed Lionel. It will kill you. I stared until the words blurred, then turned the phone off because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is remove the battery from their panic. I called Ethan again. Copy everything, I said. 3 weeks, all cameras. What's happening, Ms. Sterling? The truth, I said, and it seems offended. He came by with a laptop and a reluctant bravery. We watched footage until time lost its shape. At 1:13 a.m., the night before the murder, Kendra slipped into the building manager's office. She replaced a USB stick with its identical twin. A magic trick for an audience of cameras she assumed she'd already taught to forget. She's tampering, Ethan said. Erasing, I said, which is how some people try to write the future. He glanced at me. You can take this to the police. I will, I said, but I need a story that sticks. Facts alone are slippery. I wasn't wrong. People prefer narratives to numbers. They want motives that taste like gossip. What I had tasted like paperwork. What I needed would taste like justice. The broadcast cutaway. A YouTube-like frame. A hand reaches toward a subscribe button. Comments flood in from cities that exist and ones that only exist in the grammar of videos. Lagos watching. From Phoenix. Love from Karachi. Before I tell you the rest, I need witnesses' eyes on the room so I don't feel so alone in it. If you're watching, listening, reading, be with me here. Tell me what city holds your fear tonight. Tell me you believe women when they say the world changed between floors. Now watch with me. The red dress. I invited my son and his wife to dinner because families understand lies better with silverware in their hands. I set the table the way marriages used to look: white cloth, clear glasses, candles the color of forgiveness. Beneath the table, hidden against my knees, lay a black folder fat with the life Kendra had hoped we'd never meet. When the doorbell rang, I took a breath I hoped was bigger than the room. Darius entered first, face tired enough to admit worry. Kendra followed, a red dress, pulling the light to her and turning it cruel. She scanned the room the way a general scans land. Ara, she said, sugary, this is sweet. We haven't done this in ages. Tonight is about family, I replied, mouth like a zipper. Our special guest arrived last, wearing his politest shirt and the look young men wear when they know they've stepped into a story that will not treat them gently. Who is this? Kendra asked, voice already flattening the room. A friend, I said. He fixes things. We ate in a choreography of glances and withheld sentences. When the wine found our glasses, I watched Kendra's hand. The tremor was small, barely a rumor, but it was there. Darius, I said softly, do you remember the man in the elevator? His fork paused. The room pulled taut. Mom, why bring him up? Because I learned something, I said, and slid the black folder onto the table, then opened it like a wound. On the wall, Ethan projected the footage. Kendra entering the manager's office, exchanging USBs, the cold calm of someone who does homework at the scene of the crime. What is this? Darius asked, hurt, threading his anger. It could be nothing, Kendra said quickly, and the speed of her sentence was a confession. A misunderstanding. People make mistakes. It could be, Ethan allowed, if we didn't also have the altered financials bearing your name, the transfers, the shells, the shadow accounts. The room was very quiet then. Red dress, candlelight, my son slowly standing, the math in his head adding up to a number that didn't spell love. Tell me it's not true, he whispered to his wife. Kendra met his eyes, then looked at me instead. The mask fell, and the woman beneath it was made of steel and storms. She didn't answer. The phone rang, the old landline I keep because it remembers how voices used to sound. I answered. A flat voice said, a flat sentence, it's done. The file has been delivered. She won't be leaving the country. The call ended like a cut rope. Kendra's face went bloodless. What did you do? Nothing, you haven't practiced. I replied. I told the truth to someone who could use it. She laughed once, a sound with edges. You think this is over? I think it's begun, I said. When the police arrived, the building came to the hallway like parishioners. No one spoke. Some stories require silence to keep their shape. The officers led Kendra down the stairs. The red dress became a moving dot of warning, then a memory. Ethan touched my elbow. You did the right thing. No, I said, watching the space she'd occupied and the air that had already forgotten her shape. I did the necessary thing. Tagged the second note 3 nights later. The building slept hard. I sat by the window, counting breaths when the mailbox rustled downstairs. I went down, robe tight, old woman's bravery, wrapped in the practical indignation of slippers on cold tile. Inside, an envelope. No return, no fear. The handwriting was the kind that comes from hands who've done real work, slanted, purposeful, a little tired. I knew it before I read it. Don't confront her alone. Wait for my signal. Lionel. The note was impossible. It was also true. Truth is a stubborn creature. It lives where logic can't afford rent. I climbed the stairs with a heart heavier than my groceries had ever been. In my kitchen, the pot roast waited in a dish I'd never managed to bake that Sunday because a man had taught me how to leave instead. I put the note on the table, turned it so the words faced me like a mirror, and did what good stories require before the next chapter can be told. I waited. There are 2 kinds of confessions. the ones that free you, and the ones that chain someone else in your place. 3 days after the red dress disappeared down the stairwell in handcuffs, I walked into a room where confessions were currency and learned the oldest economy in the world still trades in fear. Prologue. Shot the quiet after wide aerial, the condo tower at dusk. Sunlight drags its last gold across windows. The elevator shaft is a dark spine, cut to the hallway of the 7th floor. A lone geranium on a sill. The camera finds the scar where police tape once clung. The building made a new sound after Kendra's arrest. Not grief, not relief, something thinner, like a thread pulled quietly through cloth. Conversations softened, eyes lowered. People who had waved now nodded at the air near my face and kept moving as if I were a fire alarm that hadn't quite stopped ringing. I tried to sleep. Sleep recited the sirens back to me. I tried to eat. Food remembered the note in my throat, so I cleaned. Old women and soldiers understand this instinct. I scrubbed the kitchen to its corners and found nothing there but my own reflection in the chrome. The reflection looked like a woman who had started a war and could not yet name the enemy. When the phone called me by my full name, I knew the day would split in two. Visitation to TNT Center afternoon documentary angle. Chain link shadows laced the linoleum. A sign, all conversations may be monitored and recorded. A clock whose second hand seems to judge. They sat me at a plastic table behind glass that had collected fingerprints like fossils. She came in without the dress, without the armor that used to carry her through rooms like a monarch through courtyards. Bare face, hair pulled tight, the glamour shorn down to the person beneath, which is always the point of places like this. She picked up the phone. I did, too. The headset smelled like 100 other stories I wished I didn't have to carry. Thank you for coming, Kendra said. I didn't come for you, I said. I came for the truth. She exhaled, a fragile bravado. Then let's exchange goods. I expected denial, performance, a tightrope walk along, plausible. Instead, she leapt. I didn't kill Lionel, she said. The room rearranged itself around the sentence. A guard shifted near the door. Time took a sip of water. I asked not because I hadn't heard, but because some words must be invited to repeat themselves to prove they exist. Listen to me. Her voice shook with the effort to sound calm. I didn't kill him, and you expect me to believe that. It was Darius, she said, and spoke my son's name with the same mouth that had vowed to love him until the end of nouns. The headset grew heavy. The distance of the glass became an ocean. You're lying, I said. She leaned in, eyes bright the way a person's get when their last playing card is a razor blade. Lionel knew things about me. Yes, but he also knew things about your son. He threatened to talk. Darius panicked. He confronted him in the elevator. They struggled. Lionel fell, hit his head. She swallowed. I arrived after. The guard's walkie crackled. Somewhere a key turned. The building breathed. I pressed the receiver harder to my ear, as if the extra pressure could filter truth from strategy. Why tell me this now? I asked. Because I don't intend to drown alone, she said softly. He called me. I erased the cameras. I did what you think I did, but not the killing. I did it for him. You erased a man's last minutes like lipstick off a glass for him. Don't be moral with me. Ara, she snapped. And for a moment I saw the old Kendra, the one who negotiated with cruelty and called it focus. Your son is weak. He will not carry this well. He will drag you under him when he sinks. If I'm going to burn, I'll burn with a match in each hand. Silence stretched thin as cellophane. I let it cover us both. What do you want? I finally asked. A deal, she said, and the word walked around the room to see whom it might seduce. Help me get out. I give you what Marcus left me. I stopped breathing a little. What are you talking about? A recording, she said, almost smiling. Your husband thought ahead. He left me he recorded something about me, about the money, about she paused. Tasted the next words, about your son. He told me to hold it until I needed it. Where is it? In a place that does not open for tears, she said. You get me, air. I give you your ghost's voice. The guard knocked once on the glass. The polite thunder of rules. Time's mouth closed. Kendra put the receiver down, stood, and before the door collected her, threw one last sentence like a stone through a window. If you think you've already paid for the truth, you haven't even seen the bill. The door took her away. I sat there with the receiver still at my ear and listened to the tone hum where her voice had been thin, merciless, endless. Then I went home to a recording that didn't exist yet, and a son who might be a stranger. Interlude, experts and mothers. Cut away. A forensic psychologist in soft office light. Psychologist to camera. Confessions under constraint often aim not at truth but at redistribution of blame, of power, of narrative. The question is never merely, is she lying? But what does she need this to become true? Cut away. My kitchen at dusk. Kettle whistles. The sound is a thread through the film. Narrator VO mothers are experts in redistribution. We spread hunger thin over whole winters. We turn our own sleep into blankets. We pay for everyone to be warm. But there comes a price you cannot pay. The one that asks for your child's innocence after it's already been spent. I poured tea and watched the steam try to write the future on the air. I let it fail. Steam always does. The reflection grief teaches you to clean in strange places. I pulled out the black folder again and laid evidence like cutlery. The USB from Ethan, the stills, the photocopies of accounts laid sideways so the math couldn't walk away. I queued up the elevator camera 4th floor. Doisy Dezoy to pay me and watched us step in. Lionel first, then me, then the door folding like a book shutting on its best chapter. The 5-minute gap yawned. But there are mirrors in elevators. Polished chrome, little inadvertent eyes. I paused at a frame I'd skimmed before, zoomed until pixels begged for mercy. There, in the sheen of the stainless panel, distorted but legible, the suggestion of a broad shoulder, turned, a head tilted the way it had tilted when my son was 12 and lying about a broken window, toward the floor, away from judgment. Not Lionel, not me. The chest forgot its job. My hands went cold, the precise cold of an operating room where the surgeon says, scalpel, and everyone aspires to honesty as a profession. Darius, I said into the empty room, and his name broke open in the air like a fruit you didn't know was rotten until the knife entered. The doorbell at dawn wide shot, 4:13 a.m. The city is a wet blackboard. Somewhere, the first bus rehearses the day's route. The doorbell rang, the way a final decision does. He stood there with last night still on him, beard unshaven, shirt creased like it had slept on a chair, eyes red at the edges, as if someone had ironed the truth into them. Mom, Darius said, his voice was a bridge trembling under too much weight. I need to talk to you. I wanted to slam the door on whatever words came next. I wanted to rewind him to 3, to 6, to 9. To the boy who called nightmares the dark-eyed man, and climbed into my bed like a question mark. I wanted the older magic, the one where a mother's arms could bless the world right out of danger. But I stepped aside. Love is a door that opens even when the house is on fire. He sat on the couch and made a fist with both hands. When the clock found 5, I realized we had been breathing instead of talking because neither of us trusted language. Kendra told you something, he said. She told me a lot of things. I answered, I want yours. He stared at the wall, the way men do when they want a different answer than the one they carry. It was an accident, he said, and the word entered the room wearing a suit. It didn't fit. I did not touch him. I wanted to. My hands ached with it. I held still. Lionel came to me. He said he had proof. About Kendra. About how the money moved. He said if I didn't help, it would ruin everything. And then, my voice sounded like my mother's, tired, iron under lace. I waited for him by the elevators. He stopped. Tears make a person stutter with their whole face. He was going to go to the police. I panicked. We argued. He pushed me. No, I pushed him first. I think he clenched his jaw, as if he could bite the chronology into a better order. He fell, hit his head. I didn't mean to, I swear. Silence thickened the air. I stood in the middle of it like a lamppost too far from any road to be useful. I called Kendra. He went on. She told me to leave, said she'd handle it. She did. What she did. He looked up finally, a drowning man, asking water for grace. I didn't know what to do, Mom. You do now, I said, and my voice came back to me from a long way away. His face a map of the boy and the man trying to occupy the same Can you forgive me? Forgiveness is not a word. It's a weather. It moves in and out of you on fronts you don't control. I can try, I said, the only sentence I could say without lying to him or myself. He nodded as if he'd been waiting for that exact phrasing, then surprised me with the next, I'm going to turn myself in. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, and the counter gripped me back. No, yes, he said, I can't live inside this anymore. I already spoke to a lawyer. I saw the man under the boy than the one Marcus had loved on the days we couldn't love each other. I saw the modest courage of a person finally walking into the room he's spent years circling. Do it with dignity. I said, because that's the only instruction that ever mattered. He stood. We hugged, not for absolution, not for permission, but for inventory. He pulled away, kissed my forehead like a benediction, and left the way he arrived. My son. And not. Interlude. Marcus speaks. Cutaway. Precinct conference room. Fluorescent lighting hums. A small speaker sits on the table. An officer with the face of someone who has seen the end of 10,000 stories gestures to the device. Officer Ms. Sterling, we recovered a file connected to Mrs. Reed. We thought you should hear it first. He pressed play. Marcus V. Tape, if you're listening, it means the worst version of the future arrived on time. Kendra is not what she seems. But if something happens to me, don't make revenge your second language. Look after Darius. He isn't wicked. He is blind. If you have to choose between the truth and your son, choose to save his soul. The room went liquid. I put my hand over my mouth to keep what I was feeling from escaping and flooding everybody else's life. On the recording, my husband cleared his throat the way he used to before saying something he knew would unsettle the day. Marcus, VO, Lionel Evans has copies. He knows where to put them if I don't make it home. And, Olarara few. Ever hear this? Forgive as strategy, not as surrender. Click, silence. I pressed my palm flat on the table and thanked a man I had already buried for showing up at the exact minute I needed him. Surrender. Courthouse steps. Morning, Darius. In a charcoal jacket that wears him instead of the other way around. Cameras keep their distance. The city keeps its speed. He turned himself in the way men go into the ocean. One deliberate step beyond the last safe sand. Chest, trying to remember how to breathe in a new element. I walked beside him, and then I didn't. There is a line where a mother stops. I found it and stood on the right side of it, and I waved without moving my hand. Inside, he gave his statement. The words "no intent" entered the record, a small raft with both our names on it. The prosecutor wrote down versions. The law rummaged in its pockets for mercy. Cut away. Courtroom pews. I sit in the second row, as if the first belonged to somebody braver. A public defender whispers in my son's ear. He nods like prayer. During his allocution, he said the sentence that sewed a torn year back together with the crudest but most honest thread. I don't ask for clemency. Darius said, I ask that my mother know that everything good I am, she taught me, and everything else I will now unlearn. If there is a sound that is not a sob but its cousin, I made it then. The city takes sides. News doesn't care who loves whom. It wants shape, heat, a headline that fits a phone screen. They gave our tower a nickname. They gave my name a misspelling. They found a photograph of me with a cake 2 birthdays old and made it look like a mugshot by removing the color. Neighbors curated their distance. Doris left a pie at my door with a note that said "only for strength," and I loved her forever for refusing the word sorry. The Peterson twins became helpful in waves. Guilt is a tide. Ethan kept showing up to check the boiler, which is a young man's way of guarding a hallway without announcing himself. Bodyguard. At night, the elevator hummed again. People trusted it, the way they trust any machinery that promises to move them away from their problems, up or down. I took the stairs. The keychain. A week disappeared the way weeks do, loudly, then all at once. I was sorting Marcus's desk again. Grief is Sisyphean housekeeping, when a small keychain caught the lamp. Cheap metal, a flattened oval, on the back, engraved almost shyly, Evans. I turned it over. A seam I hadn't felt before gave under my fingernail. A sliver of plastic popped free. Inside, a micromemory card the size of a thumbnail and the weight of a cathedral. I slid it into my old laptop until it recognized the future and opened it. A single file. No name. No metadata that I trusted. I clicked. The video bloomed. Marcus at his desk, too alive for a dead man. Beside him, Lionel, younger by worry, eyes already tired in a way I now knew meant I have seen the numbers and they add to a catastrophe. Marcus, on video, if something happens to me, this goes to Ara. She needs the whole picture, not the version anyone sells her. Lionel, you understand, sir. If this is discovered, it implicates more than Marcus. I understand that my son has signed papers he didn't read carefully, and that my daughter-in-law reads every paper like a recipe for survival. I understand that people will call what I'm about to do betrayal, and what it actually is, a father keeping the receipts. They cataloged details the shell companies named, like summer homes, the bank accounts that never knew winter, the dates that placed Kendra where she swore she never was, and then Marcus looked into the lens like it was my face. Marcus, Aura. If you get this, believe the worst of the money and the best of the boy. Protect him from everything except his own consequence. The video ended not with a dramatic cut but with the ordinary clatter of a pen. That small sound undid me more than any speech. I leaned back in the chair and realized my life had become a conversation between three ghosts: the husband I lost, the neighbor who tried to save me, and the son who still might. Interlude: the building as witness camera floats down the central stairwell, past a tangle of potted palms, a bulletin board with Lost Cat flyers, a notice about the annual fire drill. Buildings remember the weight of us. Every step sands a fraction of a stair. Every hand on a banister polishes the wood into confession. We move through them like weather, changing their seasons, and sometimes, if a building is unlucky, it learns too much. Mine had learned a murder. It had learned a woman's courage and a man's mistake. It had learned to keep secrets badly. Now it was going to learn to tell them well. The way forward: I met with the lead detective again, laid the keychain on the table like a relic, showed the recording, watched his features do the thing a decent man's face does when a case he thinks he understands writes a new chapter in its own blood. "This helps," he said simply. "Help him," I answered, and didn't specify whether I meant my son, Lionel, or the part of Marcus that still believed in the fairness of human systems. When I left the precinct, rain rehearsed honesty on the sidewalk. The city smelled like metal and relief. I bought a cheap umbrella from a man who sold weather solutions and thought about justice. How we say the word like it's a destination and not a path walked in the rain by women with groceries and ghosts. Epilogue of Part 2, The Elevator. Pauses. That night, I stood outside the elevator. I looked at the stop button and thought about choice, about the day a man I barely knew told me to pretend to be sick in order to live. I touched the button gently, not to stop anything but to thank it for being there when I needed the illusion of control. The doors opened. A woman and her little boy stood inside. He held a toy truck like a trophy. He looked up at me with the clean stare of children who have not yet learned how many versions of a story a grown-up can tell. "Going up?" his mother asked. I nodded, stepped in, and for the first time since the sirens, allowed the machine to carry me. We rose past 4, past the scar in time, past the place where seconds turned into a different life. When we reached 7, he waved the way little boys do, as if waving were the first language, and we had all forgotten it. I waved back. The doors closed. I stood in my hallway and listened to the elevator descend with other people's hope inside it. Confessions had begun. Theirs, mine, the city's. What waited ahead would hurt, and heal, and hurt again. But there is an arithmetic to truth. When you add enough of it together, the sum begins to look like mercy. Tomorrow, there would be court dates, and edits to the news, and a visit from a young woman with her father's eyes, and a pendant that said, 10 minutes can change a life. Tonight, there was only this: a window, a lamp, a note, now creased to softness, and the sound of my husband's voice still echoing from the little speaker in the precinct. Forgive, as strategy, not as surrender. I set the note on my nightstand, turned off the light, left the door cracked the way I used to when Darius was small and the dark-eyed man came, and in the hush that followed, I heard what I had been straining to hear since the day the elevator learned my name: not the end, the next beginning. They say time heals all wounds, but that's not true. Time just teaches you how to walk while they're still bleeding. The night after Darius confessed, I realized that forgiveness isn't something you feel, it's something you decide. Again and again, every morning the world asks if you still mean it. The morning after, camera drifts through the apartment, morning light leaks through thin curtains, dust dances in slow motion. On the counter, a cold teacup and a wrinkled note rest side by side. The day after my son turned himself in, the city sounded different. The usual traffic outside, the horns, the construction, the world pretending to be busy, all seemed muffled, as if the universe had put a blanket over its own noise. I stood at the window watching the street, waiting for something to change, for an apology from the sky, a sign from Marcus, a reason to believe I'd done the right thing. But the only thing that arrived was silence. In the hallway, the elevator hummed. Someone pressed the call button. Life was still moving, only I wasn't. I walked to the mirror, saw my own face, and whispered, "You got your truth, Alara. Now what are you going to do with it?" The letter by noon, the mail arrived. Bills, ads, a newsletter from the neighborhood association, and one envelope with no return address. My hands hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, shaky, uneven, but familiar. It read, Mrs. Sterling, thank you for believing my father was a good man. My name is Elise Evans. I think you knew him as Lionel. My breath caught. She continued. He wrote about you in his journal, said you reminded him of the conscience he'd lost trying to fix other people's mistakes. I'd like to see you. I think he wanted that too. At the bottom, a phone number and a single sentence in smaller handwriting. His handwriting. If she ever finds this, tell her 10 minutes can change a life. The meeting fade in. A small cafe on the corner. The sound of cups, spoons, quiet talk. The doorbell jingles softly as Alara enters. A young woman stands to greet her, mid-20s, brown hair tied back, gentle eyes that echo her father's. Mrs. Sterling, Elise. They shake hands, though both feel like hugging a ghost. You look like him, I said. Around the eyes, so they tell me. She smiled softly. He used to say his eyes were his only honest feature. We sat. The sunlight painted both our faces the same color. I wanted to thank you, she said. You tried to help him. I didn't do enough, I whispered. She shook her head. He saved you. That was enough for him. I stared at my tea, the liquid trembling. He died trying to save everyone, even people who didn't deserve it. Elise reached into her bag and took out a small silver pendant. On the back, engraved words, 10 minutes can change a life. He left this for you, she said. He told me to find you one day and give it to you. The pendant caught the light like a small moon. I held it, and for a moment the whole world stilled. The same stillness that filled the elevator the day he whispered, "Don't say anything." Marcus's ghost that night. I placed the pendant beside Marcus's photograph. The candle's flame flickered between them, as if the two men were having a silent conversation I wasn't invited to hear. When you love more than once in a lifetime, the heart doesn't divide, it deepens. Lionel had saved me. Marcus had built me, and both had left me a truth too heavy to carry alone. I whispered into the empty room. Marcus, he did what you asked. He protected me, even when it killed him. The candle swayed as if to answer. And for the first time in years, I wept not from fear, but from gratitude. Redemption weeks turned into months. Darius's trial was short. The court ruled no intent to kill a manslaughter charge, reduced for cooperation. 2 years. I attended every hearing, every testimony. I never missed a single day. When the judge read the sentence, Darius didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, but his tears fell in my direction. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted names, microphones blinked red. I said nothing. Justice doesn't need an audience. It just needs to happen. But inside my pocket, the silver pendant pressed against my palm. 10 minutes can change a life, I reminded myself. 2 years can change a man. The letter from prison months later. I received his first letter. Mom, I wake up at dawn every day. I joined the kitchen duty. I think I like it. It's strange, but cooking for strangers feels like penance and peace at the same time. Sometimes, I dream of Dad. He doesn't speak in the dreams. He just looks at me the way he used to when I was little, proud, but tired. I think that's how forgiveness looks from heaven. I can't undo what I did, but I can choose who I become next. Please don't worry about me. Just promise me one thing. Live, not survive live. Your son, Darius. I folded the letter, pressed it to my heart, and whispered, I'm trying. The whispering elevator. One evening, I took the elevator again for the first time in months. The metal doors closed with a sigh, sealing me in. My reflection stared back, older, worn, but alive. As the numbers climbed, a soft mechanical hum filled the air. And for just a heartbeat, I swore I heard his voice. Lionel's a faint echo. 10 minutes, Mrs. Sterling. Make them count. I smiled, closed my eyes, and let the elevator rise. Healing the building. Time moved on. New families moved into the condo. Children filled the hallways with laughter where whispers used to live. Doris from the 5th floor started baking again. Even the Peterson twins began holding the door open for each other. I reopened my husband's study and turned it into a small reading room for the building. A place with warm lights and quiet chairs. On the wall, a framed photo of Marcus, and beneath it, a small brass plaque that read, in memory of those who told the truth when silence was safer. Sometimes, neighbors would stop by. They'd sit, sip tea, and talk about the weather, unaware they were sitting in the aftermath of a storm. Darius's return to years past. The day he came home, the sky was soft gray, not sad, just thoughtful. He had aged, but his eyes were calm. He didn't say much at first. He just stood in the doorway, unsure whether he still belonged. You look thinner, I said, smiling through tears. You look stronger, he answered. We hugged for a long time. No speeches, no apologies, just a silence that finally felt kind. Later, we sat at the table where the red dress had once glittered like danger. Now there was only tea and a quiet peace between us. What will you do now? I asked. Leave, he said softly. Start over. Maybe teach, maybe travel, but this time, without lies. I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. Ending scene. Peace that night. After he left, to begin again, I went to the balcony. The city below was alive. Sirens, laughter, wind, light. I held the silver pendant in my hand and whispered, "Thank you, Lionel. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, life." Because in the end, survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about learning to live with what the truth leaves behind and still finding beauty in what remains. The elevator chimed below. Laughter echoed up the shaft. Children played where fear once stood. Sometimes I wonder if the walls remember, if they whisper to each other about the woman who almost died, the man who tried to save her, and the son who finally told the truth. And I hope they do, because stories, like buildings, stay standing only when they're remembered. They say the truth arrives late, but when it does, it doesn't knock. It opens the door, steps inside, and asks if you're ready to start over. They tell you moving on means leaving the past behind. But what if the past doesn't leave you? What if it lingers, not as a ghost that haunts, but as a quiet companion reminding you what truth costs and what love demands? 6 months later, camera pans over a park bathed in afternoon light. Children laugh in the distance. Birds wheel across a pale blue sky. Cut to Alara sitting on a bench, a notebook in her lap, her gaze steady but far away. 6 months. That's how long it took for silence to become peace instead of punishment. The city kept its rhythm, my building found its laughter again, and for the first time in decades, I learned how to live without fear of the next knock at the door. But ghosts have good timing. They visit when you stop expecting them, when life starts tasting like itself again. The unexpected visitor one late afternoon. There was a knock on my door, soft, unsure. I opened it to find Detective Rowan, the same man who once stood there with grim eyes and a badge heavy with news. "Ms. Sterling," he said, "I thought you might want to know. The Kendra Reed case is closed." I nodded, unsure what feeling belonged to that news. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. "She was sentenced?" I asked. "Yes. Financial crimes, evidence tampering, obstruction. She won't be out for a long time." "And Lionel?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "We're reopening the commendation list. His actions that day, the note, the warning, they saved your life. The department's making sure it's recognized." I felt the sting behind my eyes. "It's late," I whispered, "but thank you." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a photograph, grainy, from the security footage that had survived. Lionel's face, eyes focused, mouth forming the words I could almost hear again. "Don't say anything." Letters across distance. Rios wrote from the rehabilitation program where he worked after release. His handwriting had changed, slower, steadier, like someone learning to be gentle with himself. "Mom, there's a garden behind the facility. I take care of it now. Funny, I used to hate dirt under my nails, but now, when I dig, I feel like I'm planting apologies." I think about Dad sometimes, about Lionel, about how both men, in their own ways, saved us, one with silence, one with sacrifice. I don't deserve peace, but I'm trying to grow toward it. If you can, send me a photo of the pendant. I think Dad would have liked to see me remember what 10 minutes can do. I took a picture of it lying in my palm, sunlight glinting off the engraved words. I sent it with a note. "Forgiveness is like a seed, son. It doesn't grow where there's shame. It grows where there's light." The cafe turn, the small cafe where I'd met Elise, had become a ritual stop. She joined me every Friday after her nursing shifts. One day, she brought a box wrapped in old newspaper. "It's his journal," she said quietly. "I think you should have it. He wrote a lot about your husband, about you." I traced the edges of the worn leather cover. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "He said once some truths aren't meant to stay buried. They're meant to be passed on when someone's ready to hold them. I think you're ready." That night, I opened the journal. Inside were entries dated months before Lionel's death, notes about Marcus's investigation, sketches of company logos, figures, names. But between the evidence, there were paragraphs written like prayers. "April 3rd, she smiled at me today in the elevator. Just a neighbor, but kind eyes. I hope she never learns what this building hides." April 19th, Marcus trusted me more than I trust myself. If something happens to him, I'll do what he asked, even if it kills me. The pages smelled faintly of ink and time. I closed the book and whispered, "It did kill you, but you kept your word." The memorial 3 months later. The residents gathered in the courtyard. Ethan had organized it, a memorial garden in Lionel's honor. A small plaque under a young maple tree read, "In memory of Lionel Evans, who chose courage over comfort and truth over silence." I brought Marcus's old fountain pen and placed it under the soil near the roots. The pen that had signed the first report exposing Kendra's fraud. It felt right. One man's words resting beside another's bravery. The air smelled of rain and jasmine. I felt Marcus's hand on my shoulder, not in body, but in memory. The phone call later, that week, Elise called. "There's something you should hear," she said. It was in the last audio file my father recorded. I didn't notice it until now. She sent it to me. Lionel's voice filled my living room, soft, tired, but resolute. "If Alara ever hears this, tell her not to blame the boy. He was scared. Fear makes good people do terrible things. Tell her that her husband forgave him before he knew the reason. Tell her I'm glad I met her, even for 10 minutes. I sat there, tears sliding silently down my face. It was the last missing piece, the one I didn't know I needed. Closure months later, Darius returned home. The city was different. Or maybe it was us who'd changed. We walked through the courtyard, past Lionel's tree. He stopped in front of the plaque and read it aloud. His lips trembled. He deserved better. "He got it," I said. "He got remembered." He turned to me. "Mom, do you ever stop missing them?" "No," I said honestly, "but I stopped being angry at life for taking them." The elevator ride, the final scene of that year, played itself. We stepped into the elevator together, mother and son. The same steel walls, the same hum. The panel glowed softly, reflecting two faces marked by loss but alive in their peace. When we reached the 4th floor, I pressed the emergency stop. Darius looked at me, startled. "Why did you—" "This," I whispered, holding up the silver pendant, "is where everything changed." He stared at it, then at me, tears gathering. "Mom," he said, voice breaking, "thank you for forgiving me." "I didn't forgive you to save you," I said. "I forgave you to save myself." I pressed the button again. The elevator resumed its journey upward, smooth, quiet, almost gentle. The balcony that night. I stood on the balcony, the city lights shimmering below. I could hear children laughing again, the elevator's distant hum, the life I'd almost lost still unfolding around me. Grief never leaves you. It just learns new ways to sit beside you. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it smiles, sometimes it hands you a folded note that says, "Get out of here if you want to live." And sometimes you do, but not from danger, from the fear that you'll never heal. I lifted the pendant to the light. Its engraving caught the last gleam of dusk. 10 minutes. That's all it took to lose everything, and 10 minutes more to start again. Some people survive tragedy by forgetting it. Others survive by turning it into purpose. I wasn't sure which kind I was until the day another stranger handed me a note that felt too familiar. 1 year later, wide shot. The condo tower, under clear spring sunlight. Windows open, curtains flutter. A city that once whispered tragedy now hums with normalcy. A year had passed since the night I found peace on my balcony. The seasons had changed without asking my permission. Spring came with its gentle arrogance, birds in the courtyard, children laughing where sirens once echoed, and a breeze that no longer smelled like fear. I had learned to live quietly. My days were full of small things, tending the memorial garden, teaching the building kids how to plant tulips, writing letters to Darius. Every Sunday, I'd visit the park, sit by the same bench where Lionel's daughter had once handed me the silver pendant, and read. Some days I read novels, others, I just read the sky. I thought my story had ended, but stories, like truth, don't end, they circle back. The woman from 8BIT began with a knock. When I opened the door, a woman stood there, nervous smile, holding a stack of mail. "Hi, Miss Sterling. I'd just moved into 8B. I think some of your mail got into my box." She handed over the letters, then hesitated. "You're the lady from the elevator story, right?" I smiled faintly. "That's what they say." Her smile faded. "I'm sorry to bring this up, but something strange happened this morning." She explained that the elevator had stopped between the 4th and 5th floors. No one was inside. When maintenance checked the panel, they found a folded piece of paper jammed into the emergency button. She handed it to me. It wasn't old, not yellowed or fragile. Crisp, recently written, on it, in blue ink, "Truth doesn't die, it waits." My blood turned cold. The maintenance room, Agini, went to find Ethan, the superintendent. "Is this your handwriting?" I asked, showing him the note. He frowned. "No, but it's the same ink, same kind of paper as Lionel's notes, isn't it?" He opened the maintenance logs. "There's been no elevator maintenance request since February, so someone used the emergency panel." He nodded slowly. "Or wanted you to think so. We checked the security footage. Nothing unusual. Until 2:17 a.m., the camera caught a flicker in the light. Then static. Then a brief frame, a shadowed figure near the elevator control panel, slim build, wearing gloves. The footage cut out right after the note appeared. A letter from the past, that night. Unable to sleep, I opened Lionel's journal again. I had read it many times, but this time, a page near the end caught my eye, one I hadn't noticed before. June 14th. "If anything happens to me, she'll keep finding notes. I left more than one. Marcus wanted me to. He said sometimes the only way to keep people safe is to keep them asking questions." My breath caught. She know when the right one arrives. The right one. Was this it? Darius's visit. Darius arrived 2 days later, unannounced. He looked older, but his eyes had a new light in them, the kind peace gives after long punishment. "I got a job," he said, "teaching at a youth center. They needed someone for mentorship programs." I smiled. They chose the right man. He looked around the apartment, his gaze landing on the note pinned to the corkboard. "What's that?" "Something someone left in the elevator." He frowned. "Do you think it's a threat?" I said, "it's a reminder." The call from the detective the next day. Detective Rowan called. "Ms. Sterling, I thought you should know something strange." The Kendra Reed case, one of the sealed boxes we archived, contained another folder. Handwriting matches. Lionel Evans. It was hidden inside a maintenance report. "What's in it?" "We're still analyzing it, but there's mention of a second account, overseas, under a false name. ARS could be initials." "ARS," I whispered. "Alara Sterling." "Maybe," he said carefully, "but the dates don't line up. It was created after your husband's death. Someone was using your name." The search for the truth. I spent the next days digging through old paperwork, Marcus's files, the boxers I once swore never to open again. In one, I found a receipt, a bank transaction from 6 years ago. The signature at the bottom was forged, but the handwriting looked eerily close to Kendra's, and next to it, a witness signature. Lionel Evans. He'd signed it, probably under pressure, a forged signature under his supervision. Maybe he'd been threatened or worse, trapped. And that meant someone else had still been pulling strings behind Kendra. Someone higher. The phrase from the note echoed in my head. "Truth doesn't die, it waits." The meeting at the Gardena. A week later, I met Elise again at the memorial garden. The maple tree had grown taller, its branches now shading the bench beneath it. "Elise," I said softly, "did your father ever mention someone else? Anyone who worked with Kendra?" She hesitated. "There was one name in his address book, V. Ainsworth. He underlined it twice." I froze. That was the name of Marcus's old business partner, the man who disappeared after the company folded. "Elise," I said, voice trembling, "I think your father was protecting more than me. He was protecting the truth about Marcus's death." Revelation. Later that night, I reopened Marcus's recording, the one found on the memory card. I slowed the audio, listened for background noise, and there it was, faint but clear, a voice I hadn't noticed before. A man's voice, saying, "Vernon, she can't know." Vernon Ainsworth. I closed my eyes, the pendant warm in my palm. Marcus hadn't just uncovered financial fraud, he'd uncovered betrayal by someone he trusted, someone still out there. The story wasn't over. The danger wasn't either. The hallway once more. The next morning, I walked down the hallway. The elevator waited, silent, its doors reflecting my face. I pressed the button. It opened empty. No note this time, no whisper. But as I stepped inside, I felt it again, that faint hum, the echo of a warning that once saved my life. I looked up at the ceiling camera and whispered, "I'm listening, Lionel. I'm still listening." The doors closed. The story continued. Some truths hide in the light, smiling at you every day until you finally realize what they've been saying all along. Marcus's ghost had stopped whispering, but his unfinished business hadn't. The letter that shouldn't exist. Camera glides over Alara's desk. Lionel's journal, the silver pendant, the most recent note. A new envelope sits among them. Marked confidential, private estate inquiry. A week after the last note appeared, a letter arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize. It carried Marcus's name, not mine, not Darius's. His dot inside was a single sheet. Mrs. Sterling, we have recently discovered assets connected to your late husband's company. Mr. Vernon Ainsworth has requested to meet you personally to settle old accounts. Please confirm a date. The name pulsed on the page like a heartbeat I hadn't heard in years. The man who had vanished after Marcus's accident now asking for a meeting. Darius returns. He came the next morning, unshaven, wearing the tired hope of someone still rebuilding. Mom, he said, I read the article about the reopened investigation. You're not going alone, are you? No, I lied. He saw through it, but let me pretend. That's the thing about mothers and sons, we trade lies like heirlooms, each pretending it protects the other. The office of Vernon Ainsworth, wide shot, downtown building, all glass and ambition. Inside, cold marble, ticking clock. He was older now, gray at the temples, suit still tailored like gilt could be ironed out. Mrs. Sterling, he said, voice polite but brittle, I wondered when you'd come. You invited me. He gestured for me to sit. On the table lay a folder labeled Sterling Investments, Private Holdings. I wanted to clear the air, he began. Your husband was a good man, but misguided. He suspected fraud where there was only mismanagement. Then, why disappear for 7 years? His smile cracked. I was advised to, by people who thought silence was safer. One of them was your daughter-in-law Kendra. Yes. She came to me after Marcus's death, said she could contain the problem if I helped redirect the funds. I refused. A week later, Lionel Evans called, said Marcus had left him proof. 2 days after that, Evans was dead. The air thinned. You're saying Kendra killed him. I'm saying someone made sure the truth died before it reached you. He slid the folder across the table. Inside were bank transfers, emails, signatures, names I hadn't seen since Marcus's final days. Every arrow pointed back to a single account. ARS, not me, a shell Marcus created to hide money from them. Not steal it. My husband had faked his own trail to protect me. The storm breaks. I walked out into rain. The city shimmered. My reflection followed me in every window. Widow, witness, survivor, detective, sinner. Darius waited outside in the car. When I showed him the folder, his jaw tightened. He lied to protect us, he said quietly. He always did. And now, I said, we finish what he started. The trap that night, I called Detective Rowan. We arranged a sting, emails traced, calls logged. Vernon agreed to meet again to finalize. He brought a flash drive. He didn't know it was already mirrored to the precinct's server. Inside the files, ledgers, offshore accounts, the proof of a network that stretched far beyond Kendra. Corporate fraud, bribes, insurance tampering. The reason Marcus had died by accident. When they cuffed Vernon, he didn't fight. He looked at me and said, almost kindly, you were always the smartest one in the room. Marcus knew it. That's why he left the breadcrumbs for you, not the police. The recording weeks later, Rowan handed me a final audio file recovered from Vernon's computer. Marcus VO, if you're hearing this, Ara, you've reached the end. I couldn't save my name, but maybe I could save yours. Trust, Lionel, trust Darius. And when you find Vernon, don't let hate finish what greed began. Truth isn't revenge, it's release. I pressed pause and let the silence finish the sentence for him. Close. Vernon Ainsworth's arrest made small headlines. The building slept easier. The maple in the memorial garden bloomed early that spring. Doris and I returned there one evening. He placed a single white rose by Lionel's plaque. Guess it's over, he said. No, I replied. It's complete. There's a difference. He nodded, eyes shining. Completion doesn't erase pain. It just gives it context. 10 minutes again. Interior, elevator, warm light. The pendant glints against Alara's chest. They say 10 minutes can change a life. They never say how many lives those minutes can save. I pressed 7. The doors slid closed. Somewhere between floors, the world held its breath the way it did that first day. Only this time, there was no fear, only gratitude. As the elevator rose, I whispered to the unseen air, rest now, Marcus. Rest, Lionel. We're free. The doors opened. Light flooded in, cut to black. Some stories refuse to stay personal. When you uncover a truth that almost killed you, the world starts bringing you more, one survivor at a time. The seminar interior, a small community center, chairs in neat rows, a projector hums. On screen, a title slide, When silence speaks, the power of truth in everyday lives. After Vernon Ainsworth's arrest, I stopped trying to move on. You don't move on from truth, you build on top of it. The police called me a witness, the papers called me a miracle, but I was neither. I was just someone who survived long enough to understand why Lionel Evans wrote that note. He didn't save me just to keep me alive. He saved me to make sure the truth had a voice after he was gone. So, I gave it one. The foundation it started, small, a few neighbors, a borrowed hall, and one idea, a place where people could speak without fear. We called it the Sterling Foundation for Truth and Integrity. Ethan helped with logistics. Elise Evans became our first volunteer. Darius, now teaching part-time, handled outreach for families caught in similar webs of silence and deceit. Each week, people came forward, whistleblowers, widows, sons, and daughters of men like Lionel, ordinary souls caught in extraordinary lies. We listened, we documented, we helped them find their voice before someone tried to take it away. Elise's revelation one evening. Elise stayed behind after a session. She looked troubled, twisting the silver pendant she'd begun to wear like her father's. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. "My father kept another journal, a digital one. I found it on an old hard drive. It mentioned someone helping him from inside the company. Someone named Rook." "Rook?" "Yes," he wrote. "Rook is the shadow that guards the light. Do you know who that could be?" The name didn't match any records, but the phrase guarding the light felt familiar. Marcus used to say something similar when talking about Lionel. Every knight needs a rook beside him. Maybe Lionel wasn't working alone after all. The last file that night, Elise and I opened the digital journal. Most entries were encrypted, but one folder was named Inspirational. Inside, a single text file. "If you're reading this, then the foundation has begun. The truth was never meant to end with us. The world doesn't need heroes, it needs witnesses. Rook is still out there, and if the day comes when another note finds you, follow it. It means someone else is in danger." The timestamp, 3 days before Lionel's death. Elise looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "He knew he wouldn't survive." "Yes," I said quietly, "but he also knew the story wouldn't die with him." A message from the post a month later, while organizing foundation archives. I received a package, no sender, no return label. Inside was an old cassette tape and a faded photograph. Marcus and Lionel standing side by side, smiling. On the back, in Marcus's handwriting, "For when the truth is finally safe to tell." We found a player and pressed play. Marcus recording. "If this reaches you, Ara, then you've outlived the lies. Don't stop what you're doing. The world needs people who ask questions, not just those who answer them. I never wanted you to avenge me. I wanted you to outlive the fear that silenced me." He paused. The tape hissed softly. "Tell Darius I'm proud of him, not for what he did but for what he became after. That's what redemption means. Not starting over, starting honest." When it ended, the room stayed still for a long time. The interview word of the foundation spread. A local journalist asked for an interview. "Mrs. Sterling, after everything you've lost, how do you still believe in people?" I smiled faintly, because I learned the hard way that evil hides in silence, but so does kindness. You just have to give it a voice loud enough to be heard over fear. The journalist lowered his camera. "And if you could send one message to the world?" I looked directly into the lens. 10 minutes can change a life. Use them well. Darius's redemption at the foundation's first anniversary event. Darius took the stage. "I used to think truth destroyed people," he said, voice steady, "but I was wrong. Lies destroy faster. The truth just hurts long enough to make you stronger." He turned toward me, eyes full of quiet peace. "I'm here because someone refused to give up on me even when I gave up on myself." Applause filled the room. For the first time in years, I cried without shame. The return of the note later, that night. After everyone left, I found an envelope tucked under my office door. Inside, a folded piece of paper, blue ink, familiar handwriting. "You did well, Mrs. Sterling." The rook moves quietly. No signature, no trace. But I didn't feel fear, just warmth. Maybe Lionel had someone watching over us all along, or maybe some truths simply learned to write themselves. The legacy camera pans out, the foundation's lights glowing in the dark city. The maple tree outside sways in a soft breeze. Children's laughter echoes faintly. They say every ending is just another beginning. Wearing older shoes. Marcus gave me courage. Lionel gave me faith. My son gave me forgiveness, and I gave the truth a home. So, when you hear my story, don't just listen to the tragedy. Listen to what came after the silence that finally learned to speak. Fade. Out. They say every story ends when its main character dies, but that's not true. A story only ends when no one remembers why it began. Years later, wide shot, the same apartment building, older now, the maple tree outside has grown tall, its roots curling into the pavement. The camera drifts upward to the 7th floor window, soft light glowing behind lace curtains. Time doesn't heal, it softens. It blurs the edges of memory until pain becomes just another shade in the portrait of your life. 10 years had passed since the night I learned what truth costs. 10 years since Lionel's note. And in those years, I found peace not because I forgot, but because I learned how to live with the remembering. The diary interior, Alara's apartment, the walls now lined with books, photographs, and children's drawings sent by the families she helped through the foundation. On my desk lay a worn leather journal, the same one Lionel left behind, now filled with my handwriting. Inside, I'd written every name, every lesson, every person who had found their voice because one man dared to write fake sick and get out. I wasn't afraid of death anymore, but I was afraid of silence returning once I was gone. So, I started writing my last story, not for the newspapers, not for history, for the next woman who might find herself in a dark elevator with a trembling stranger and a folded note. Darius's visit. He came home one summer afternoon, taller somehow, more grounded. His hair had turned silver at the edges, and his voice carried the calm of a man who had finally forgiven himself. He hugged me tight. "Mom," the doctor said. "I know," I smiled. "It's not something to cry over, son. It's just time doing its job." We sat on the balcony. The city shimmered below, as alive as ever. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. "You took the truth and built something good from it. That's more than most people do with their second chances." He squeezed my hand. "You're the reason I got one." "No," I whispered. "I just handed you the note. You decided to read it." The pendant that night. I took the silver pendant from around my neck. The engraving was worn now, the letters faint. 10 minutes can change a life. I placed it in Darius's palm. "This doesn't belong to me anymore," I said. "When you meet someone lost, someone scared, someone holding on by a thread, give it to them. Tell them it saved your mother once." He nodded, trying to hide his tears. "Promise me something, Darius. Anything. When the truth hurts and it will, don't protect people from it. Protect them with it." He nodded again, unable to speak. The letter to the future. In my final weeks, Elise Evans visited often. She was older to now, working as a nurse, helping others like her father had. I gave her Lionel's journal and a sealed envelope addressed to the Sterling Foundation archives. "What's in it?" she asked. "My last confession," I said with a smile. "Every truth deserves a witness, even mine." She promised to keep it safe. The final morning soft piano plays. Morning sunlight pours through the curtains. Alara sits at her desk, writing the last page of her story. "When I was a girl, I used to think heaven was a place. Now, I believe it's a moment, a single instant where you stop fighting the world and start forgiving it." I hope, wherever Marcus and Lionel are, they've found that moment too. And maybe, when I close my eyes tonight, I'll walk into that elevator, again, not the one of fear, but the one that rises into light. She sets down the pen. The pendant is gone from her neck. The candle flickers beside her photo of Marcus and Lionel. The next generation cut to 10 years later. A young woman enters the Sterling Foundation. She's nervous, clutching a folded piece of paper. The receptionist greets her kindly. "First time here?" "Yes," she says. "Found this in my apartment building. It says, if you're in danger, find the Sterling Foundation." The receptionist smiles. "You came to the right place." She leads the girl inside, past the framed photos on the wall. Marcus, Lionel, and Alara Sterling, 3 faces caught between truth and eternity. The legacy lives on. Darius, now director of the foundation, addresses a small group. "My mother used to say the truth arrives late, but it never loses its way. This place exists because one man refused to stay silent, and one woman refused to stop asking why." He opens a small velvet box. Inside rests the silver pendant, gleaming softly. He fastens it around his neck before continuing. "This pendant has passed through 3 lives and saved them all. It's a reminder that courage isn't loud, it's quiet. It's a hand slipping you a note when no one's looking." The crowd stands in silent reverence. The elevator revisited. The camera returns to the old building. A young maintenance worker steps into the elevator. The doors close. The panel lights flicker softly. As the elevator ascends, the faint whisper of a man's voice echoes through the hum of machinery. 10 minutes can change a life. The worker glances around, smiles faintly and looks down. A folded note lies on the floor, the ink fresh and blue. He picks it up. Cut to black. My name is Alara Sterling. Once, a stranger handed me a note that saved my life, and because of that, I learned something simple. Truth never dies. It just changes. Hands fade and text on screen, dedicated to those who choose honesty over comfort and love over silence. Fade out.